Been a beautiful long day today. We're ready? There? Yeah. Super. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me to be moderating and hosting our first laser, Leonardo Art and Science Rendezvous, Amsterdam at Waag, as part of our STARTS program as well. My name is Maro Pebo. I work as concept developer here. I'm also an artist and curator. And tonight, or this evening, we have the privilege to have these three extraordinary speakers who also have been working a lot for a workshop that we had earlier. The topics that we are going to talk about are very close to my heart, but are also very political and very transcendental. So as we think is a great opportunity for all of us. I welcome you. The idea is that this is a conversation. So your participation is also really important. If you have insights, and we all have an experience, it's very valuable that you bring them forward and that you feel comfortable. I know the first row is empty, but you feel comfortable to participate. We have this microphone, and it's best if we come speak to the microphone, but I will be trying to pass it around. And I would like to start by introducing Julia and Isabel. So we have Julia Tomasello, which is an artist and designer who was awarded the STARTS Prize, Science, Technology and Arts Award in 2018 with her project Future Flora. And now it's part of a collective called the ALMA Collective. It's also the name of the workshop, ALMA. Exactly, we have a lot of that we have today. And she has been working with these topics for a few years now. And today she gave us an extraordinary workshop in which we went from the stories of the lives and our bodies and how we experience, let's say, the medical and the biomedical in our own bodies. And then we went into exploration, and then finally we went into the lab to understand a little bit how much literacy do we need to have about biology to be able to have more autonomy and understanding and making decisions about our lives. So I would like, and I will also have Isabel Farina here, which is a PhD candidate in engineering, but is also an expert in many topics of DIY gynecology, as we discovered today, and these grassroots movements coming from anthropology and studies and ethnography, and how like the social dimension of what we're talking. So I don't know, I think if you want to start, and then we will give the word to Professor Janneke Wijgert that I will introduce after.
Okay, hello everyone. Does it work this? I don't think so. Hello. So, hello everyone. So I'm Giulia Tomasello and Isabel Farina, and we are two co-founders of ALMA. The other two co-founders are Tommaso Busolo, which is a material scientist, and Rio Mizuta, which is an engineer specialized in nanotechnology. ALMA is a multidisciplinary studio where we combine technology and education to destigmatize the culture that surrounds this enormous silence around the female bodies, which probably we are bringing with us since centuries, and unfortunately in 2023 we're still talking about. I started, as Mara introduced, with this project called Future Flora, which was my master thesis in Central St. Martin's in 2016, and is a kit to design and prevent your vaginal infection as a candida, which is an infection that the 75% of women all over the world can get at least once in their lifetime, and the 15% is recurrent, which it means it's very difficult to still diagnostic, but also to let it go. And with this kit, a person with vulva can actually grow at home their own pad and actually grow on top a healthy vaginal flora to then wear it in the underwear and rebalance maybe a flora that during some infection is missing. And with this approach to biohacking and how we can be independent and actually be a little scientist at our home, we then moved to ALMA, which is actually also a sensor. Yes, and it's actually a project that me and Tommaso, we started to really understand, okay, if thinking to have an incubator at home. So the Future Flora project is still very far. It's a speculative project. We're thinking maybe in 50 years, maybe this can happen or maybe never. What if technology that we already wear in our pocket every day or that we have in our ear, like headphones, can be one day maybe in our underwear, and that can monitor biomarker like pH or lactobacillus, so part of a vaginal flora biomarker, and can tell us if we have some symptoms like itchiness, bad smell, that actually something is going on. So me and Tommaso, we started to do this sensor, and then Isabel and Rio joined us on the way. And through also starts, because we also went with another funding called Reframe, Rethinking Fashion, we managed to develop a first underwear, which has this sensor. And if you lose vaginal fluid, which is something we lose every day, half of this population lose every day, and it's totally normal, this vaginal fluid can then be detected by this sensor, which is textile based, and then sent to our phone the data so that we can monitor. This project we continued for 4 years, kind of, and we developed it through co-design workshops, which is actually our methodology. We started to run workshops in 2019 in Rio de Janeiro, and then we moved to Bangkok in Thailand, Malaysia, Switzerland, Spain, Germany, UK, Italy, today, Netherlands. And what we found is that the taboo is all over. Then depending on the cultures, depending on religion, beliefs, spirits, things change. But unfortunately, we are still there. Then what happened is that technology, of course, is moving forward. And if now you do workshops with people with vulva, and you ask them, hey, would you like to wear technology in your underwear? They will now tell you, of course. So if in 2019 it was quite weird to think about, and in 2016, me provoking like, hey, would you like to wear bacteria in your underwear was very, very challenging. Now we kind of got used to really have technology very close to us. But then you bring a tool, which unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunately, but the way that we got introduced is unfortunate. So this tool, if you bring it in the table, is really creating a lot of disappointment. And this tool is a speculum. So the speculum is a gynecological tool that gynecologists, they use for the visit to really see the only organ that actually we can see inside our bodies, which is the cervix. So we brought this tool in our last workshops in UK with a group of menopause and perimenopause women, ladies. And we had an amazing 3 hours workshop. And then when I took out this speculum, they got completely angry with me. And I knew it kind of, I mean, I was not so prepared. And I imagined that if I was bringing this tool out at the beginning, of course, the whole workshop was not going to be as it went. So then we decided to say, okay, let's put the sensor aside. Also, wearable technology exists since ages, but is not there yet in our reality. Like, we are not wearing anything that is technological because batteries, comfort of electronics. So let's go backward. Let's go to a lower technology to really have something that maybe everyone can make on their own, can use it on their own, is also maybe cheap, so is inclusive, accessible, and let's really work on an ALMA toolkit. But basically, we start mainly this project because of where we are coming from. And I guess now Isabel can bring you there.
Yeah, so what Julia was telling about the reaction of women seeing the speculum on the table during a workshop is quite interesting. If she had put a sex toy in the table, no one will had the same reaction. And I say that because today we were walking in Amsterdam and we were looking every single sexy shop because we knew that here we could actually find speculum. We asked in the apotheke, we couldn't find them. Actually, the pharmacist didn't even know what it was. But we entered sexy shops and we found every single type of speculum, not redesigned for sexual purposes. Maybe they're used, of course, for specific practices, but the design is the original one, like the real one that also doctors use in their studio. And we found it so interesting, the connection between a pleasure and a tool that might be scaring and we hate most of the time, and was also designed through violence. And I will tell you so why I'm saying that. So we wanted to go back to people's lives, because we have interviewed a lot of people. We have run workshop with a lot of people around the world, as Julia was mentioning. And we really understood that maybe we can wear technology, but if we still have a fear of understanding how our body works, if we still have fear of asking basic questions or pretending basic knowledge, then technology will always bring us more and more apart from our body. And this is not helping us, especially specific type of people, because we are not all the same. Everybody is not the same. So, but before saying that, one interesting aspect that we always share in our workshops, and we also share it here today, is a brief description of the history of gynecology, because for us, finding a speculum in the sex shop or having women completely freezing when seeing a speculum is the exact result of the history of gynecology. And for us today was super interesting because we were hosted in the anatomical theater, and anatomists have had a very big and important role in the development of science and medicine. And if you are a philosopher of science or medicine, one thing that you immediately study or understand is that modern medicine has been created on the knowledge of dead bodies. So when anatomists started their work on developing medicine, which was the first time that we were Western medicine, sorry, it was the first time that we were actually looking inside the bodies, how they were working, but we were looking to dead organs, to dried fluids. We were not able to see our organism, how they react together. And as most of the things that tend to happen even now is that, of course, this become a business. I really like Netherlands, but at the time of the anatomists, Netherlands was becoming actually one of the first imperialist countries. It was developing capitalism, it was developing colonization, and also the work of anatomists here in Netherlands was kind of impressive for the rest of the world. There is a big picture in the room that I think everyone knows, which is the famous anatomy lesson, which for us was quite impressive because what you see is a room full of men studying, learning, and teaching to each other. Women who had no access to that kind of knowledge. But most of the time, women's bodies were on that table. There were that female bodies on the table. And most of the time, those female bodies were prostitutes, poor women, women that had no family, no one reclaiming them. And this is the starting point for us. Medicine is not born in recently, it's very ancient. For many centuries, there was this thought about the hysteron, so the connection between the uterus and the disease called hysteria, is because for most of the time they were thought that any kind of disease that was gender related, female related, was caused by this monster in our body walking around seeking for sperm and was suffocating us, leaving us with epilepsy, with a lot of symptoms that now we will call in very different and specific ways. But since back in the ancient Greek, this was the main idea of the reason why women were getting sick. And then the treatment was marriage and sex and getting pregnant, of course. And this thought has continued for many centuries. I think everyone knows Sigmund Freud and his work on hysteria. There is a big work done in France about hysterical women. Maybe it changed. It was not the uterus that is a monster around the body, because of course anatomists helped us to understand that there is no monster walking around the body, but maybe it was the ovaries. So we need to create something specific to calm the ovaries. Maybe it was not that. Maybe it was the problem of orgasm. So Freud invented vaginal orgasm, that like really he invented the vaginal orgasm. It was no one saying that women can have orgasm only through penetration with something entering in their vagina. And we completely forgot for centuries the fact that we have a clitoris that exists, for example. And we were mentioning today that the clitoris came back in medical books only in 1994. So it disappeared for a lot of time. No one knew. And in part of our workshop, we want to show to people what are the real sizes of the different parts of the body. When we show the clitoris, unfortunately, we don't have it today with us. It was good to show you when we show the real size of the clitoris, like, you think, how is it possible that this thing completely disappeared, even in my own experience for the majority of my life, considering how big it is, how much it embraces all my vulva and vagina. Like it's quite big. I think it's it's funny. You really would like to love it. And everyone says it's like the female penis, but if you look at it, it has nothing to do with it. It's called like that because it has some similarities, but again, the language we use, like female ejaculation, female penis. No, it's something different, and we should also start reclaiming it. And going back, when we bring the speculum on the table, I think most of the people have this reaction because really the gynecological visit is really unpleasant. It's not designed to please women. And the reason why it's not designed to please women is because the speculum was actually invented by the father of modern gynecology, that I really think he didn't like women at all. His name was Dr. James Marion Sims, and I really invite you to remember this name because it's still present in medical books. So we have people telling us that it's still very nominated in the books. And his guy, he was working as as doctor in Alabama, and he was called to help owners of slaves to actually find a solution for this gynecological problem called fistula, which I will not describe you, but it's quite burdensome for women who has it. And of course, it was creating a lot of problems and damages to slaves owner because their female slaves were not able to work. They were not able to continue to produce slaves. They were not useful at all. So they need to find a solution, and they were just giving to Sims the female slaves, and he was performing for several years experimentations on different surgical procedures, developing specific tools that were helpful. And one of these is the speculum. And of course, he did it without the consent of all these women because they were slaves, so they were less than objects. At the time, no anesthesia was used because Black women were considered to not being able to suffer. So there was this idea. The anesthesia was actually available at the time, but slaves were not considered humans, so they didn't need it. Most of them died. There are few of them, only 3 women that we can still rename, and they are Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. They are the only 3 women that he actually nominated in his diaries because they were his favorites, because they were the only that were surviving and really resisting and having a resilient body on all the experimentation that he was doing on them. And of course, this was it's interesting the fact that he honored them by at least leaving a trace of their names. We have nothing about them, only their names. And now in most of the country where there are African descendant, like in US, of course, we are not speaking about the father of gynecology, but we are speaking about the mothers of gynecology, because gynecology, modern gynecology at least, has been part of it has been raised through their bodies and their suffering. So going back to the speculum, we know why we don't like it now. So it's because we like that specific discipline, that specific tool, most of the time, that specific approach to deal with a human being and what they're experiencing is not the main point. So, and this is also the reason why we wanted to design an ALMA toolkit, which is a methodology. It's a toolkit, a physical toolkit, is a network of people, is whatever is useful to have people with vagina being able to really understand and read their own body and be more aware and share and feel less lonely and less isolated. And so we, in our idea and how the workshop works and how the toolkit is built is based on, as Julia was mentioning, three blocks. And all of them are not invented by us. They're coming from the collectives, the feminist collectives in the 70s, who are those that have actually invented self-exploration as a sort of political act to being more autonomous against the lack of rights regarding abortion at the time. And we are both coming from a country, and we're both coming from regions in that country where abortion is quite impossible to do. Like, we need to move. Me personally, I have to go to France if I want to get abortion. It's much easier than having it in Italy, in my region. You, even worse, you don't have nothing where you can escape. So the first module, as said, is based on self-consciousness, which is a feminist practice about sharing, because we cannot do anything if we don't try to explore our own intimacy, our experiences, if we don't find a community and a network that can support us. And we did it through, we created this card game that can help collectives to being autonomous in facilitating self-consciousness, because it's not easy at all to open and share. But this was an idea that we had, and it's working, apparently. People really like it. And then the second part is about self-gynecology. So usually we have Julia that is really willing to share her body. And this is really practical. So we open our legs, we take the speculum in our hands, we learn how to use it. We are also able to self-produce our own lube, to create the loop that we want, that we can use with the speculum, how to insert the speculum, and then once we open the speculums, what we see. What can we read about the cervix? Why the cervix is so important? What the hell is happening when you sit on the gynecological chair? What is the gynecologist looking? And we know, and what we want to share with people is what is happening there, which doesn't mean replacing the doctor. It's just really having the basic knowledge that everyone should have. And then the last part is the mini biolab, and maybe I let you really.
Yeah, so we are taking the philosophy of biohacking, which is coming from communities, individuals that are not scientists, are not biologists, but they, through open source and do-it-yourself knowledge, which it means actually knowledge that is accessible, is inclusive, and that each of us can learn through this world of internet. We can actually do growing bacteria, we can work with DNA, and we can pretty much do it at home most of the time in our kitchen. Or if we are lucky to live near a hackerspace or a makerspace, where, for example, there is a wet lab like here, actually in this room at Waag, you can actually be even more professional by having a sterile environment and then practice biology. What we do there, we learn how to grow bacteria, mainly how to grow vaginal flora. We then learn how to inoculate, and then how to fix those bacteria in the glasses, which then we can watch in the microscope. And why this is important? First, it's important to really not be afraid, again, as we are not afraid of inserting speculum alone and to learn what is happening there. Also, we are not afraid of searching, of learning to really be a biologist, which most of the time is, again, a word surrounding by men, and that we are scared of this word of bacteria. So what we do, we then look in the microscope specifically at 3 different types of bacteria. One are the lactobacillus, which we can mainly find in healthy microflora of healthy vaginal microflora of white Caucasian women and Asian women, because Hispanic and North African, they actually have a different type of microflora, which is still healthy, but it's not lactobacillus based. And this is a recent study that we found, but which of course is not yet there in products that we buy, for example. So still our doctor, if I'm an Hispanic one, will still give me probiotics like lactobacillus after antibiotic, because it's still not there, this knowledge. And then what we look so are lactobacillus, candidiasis, which is one of the major infection, and E. coli, so Escherichia coli, which is again one of the major infection when we have a UTI, urinary tract infection. And we look at them at the microsome because we are able to recognize them. And this doesn't mean that because we're able to self-explore, because we're able to see in the lab, we become our own doctor or we become our own scientist and we don't need experts, but actually we become aware, which is most of the time we are not. We are just frustrated. We are just confused. Dr. Google, of course, makes us even more confused. And we need, in order to go to specialists, that they know what maybe we can find, but that most of the time they don't tell us, they don't communicate. We need to be able also to be aware of what is going on. And then to be curious. It's really like an active participation, which is really coming from this open source philosophy. We will produce also an open platform where we will love to share all these resources, these protocols we develop with in different workshops, also online, because the point is to really create knowledge that it can be accessible all over. So let's say if today at Waag we developed a specific protocol, what if a collective in Mexico in 4 months wants to reproduce the same protocol of self-exploration or bacteria inoculation, and they can actually take it online, reproduce it, adapt it for themselves, and then re-put it online. This is the point of how community they work, open source community. We will try to do the same. So maybe to end, I can do a call to action saying, we are looking to do more workshops. This was our second workshop because we are starting this project just a few months ago. I mean, we had the idea in January, but we managed to really kickstart it in April, May. And now we just had our second workshop. So if you are a collective or like a community of people with vulva and are interested to actually discover one of these 3 steps or all of them as a boot camp like today, where we almost like died, we are here. I mean, we are physically really can come everywhere because we like it. And yes, and because we really would love to explore more different community, different different cultures. So yes, and also stakeholders. So people expert, but expert not only in biology, but also gynecology, GP or whatever, please, let's stay in touch because we will also do a workshop with stakeholders, because the point is to really see what is happening from the other side and how we can support them in order to create this independent knowledge that people with vulva should have. So thank you for inviting us.
Incredible, amazing. Thank you so much for your work and for your presentation. After this first part, I also wanted to tell everyone who's not familiar with Waag, what Waag is. Waag is a cultural organization that works with technology and society. But we also like, as you see, working with artists, which bring us these critical and creative perspectives. Right now it's really clear how these critical and perspectives come, but also creative because they are generating these alternatives. And for this reason, we also work with the Starts Prize is one of our projects. And we also work with Leonardo, which is a series of, for Leonardo, for the laser, which is a series of these more informal conversations with artists and scientists. And these lasers happen all over the world. Many universities and institutions hold them for having these, let's say, interdisciplinary talks and the possibility of the conversations. And this is the first one that we're hosting here in Amsterdam, but you're more than welcome for our next lasers. And now I would love to give the word, be prepared for your questions. I would love to give the word to Professor Janneke Wijgert, who is a translational infectious disease researcher. We have the privilege of having Janneke, who is a full professor at the Julius Center for Health Sciences and Primary Care. And Dr. Janneke has been working on this field for over 30 years. And it's also important to say that she has no conflict of interest. That is, all her research has been funded to public research, not through private companies, which also makes a lot of difference in the capacity of us to produce knowledge and perspectives and many other things that she can for sure detail much better than I can. So yeah, welcome, Dr. Janneke.
Well, it's difficult to follow the two of you with your very inspiring talk. Yes, I've been working on the vaginal microbiome for about 30 years. I became interested in it when I was working in Zimbabwe on HIV infection in women. And we observed that women who had bacterial vaginosis, which is also a very common vaginal infection, in addition to the one that was mentioned, caused by Candida yeasts. But women who have bacterial vaginosis, and actually also women who have Candida yeasts, they tend to become infected with HIV when they are exposed to HIV much more easily. So I found this in my study, and that's when I became really interested in what is going on here. We know that HIV infects immune cells, the cells that actually are supposed to protect your body from bacteria and viruses, but the HIV virus actually infects those cells. So when you have inflammation in the vagina, you are much more likely that the virus will be able to enter your body. And so what we basically found is that when you have the wrong bacteria or you have yeasts in the vagina, you have an inflammation, which then you are much more likely to acquire HIV if you're exposed to HIV. Later on, we also found a lot of other things that can happen when you don't have the right bacteria in the vagina. For example, when you're pregnant and you carry the wrong bacteria that cause inflammation, you are much more likely to have a preterm birth, which is also a major problem. There are lots of preterm births worldwide. And children that are born prematurely suffer basically for the rest of their lives. They haven't matured enough when they're born, and this will give them problems for the rest of their life. So this is a really, really big problem for women and babies. And there were several other things that we discovered. For example, when you have the wrong bacteria in the vagina, you are more likely to have the virus that causes, or to acquire the virus that causes cervical cancer, the human papilloma virus. Now we have a good vaccine against that virus, but that's only very recent. Before that, we didn't have a vaccine, and there are still many women worldwide who don't get vaccinated. So a lot of women die of cervical cancer. So there are lots of links between the bacteria that we find in the vagina, and probably also in the uterus, but that's much more difficult to measure because we can't really get to those bacteria very easily. So the only place where we can really look is in the vagina. So we started doing that. And over the years, the techniques to be able to study the bacteria in the vagina became better. I started out having to do microscopy, very much the way you described it. But later on, other methods became available that allowed us to look in a lot more detail and also to process more samples. So we could really look at a lot of women. We did one study here in the city of Amsterdam where we sequenced, this is the technique that we now use. We looked at bacteria in the vaginas of hundreds of women in the city of Amsterdam so that we could get a sense of how many women walk around with bacteria that really aren't that good for them because of all the risks that I just described, even when they don't have any symptoms. So not all of these women have symptoms. Some of them do. They will have symptoms and they will go to see their primary care physician, or they will go to a sexual health clinic because the symptoms bother them. And many of those women have the wrong bacteria in the vagina. But we actually found that a lot of women who do not have any symptoms also carry the wrong bacteria. So having symptoms is not always the way to determine this. So we started, first of all, we started doing studies just looking what we would see because nothing was known about this really. And it was very difficult to get funding for this research because, as you can imagine, men weren't very interested. So most of the scientists in the field were women. And it took a while for us to be able to obtain the funding to do this work. But now it's actually a lot of studies have been done, and we now know quite a bit about the different types of bacteria that women carry in the vagina, and which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones are neither. You know, they're not really good, but they're also not bad. So they don't really have to be treated. And now the next step is how to make sure that the vaginal microbiome, we call it instead of flora, the vaginal, how to make sure the vaginal microbiome is as healthy as possible for most women. And as the two of you have said, I think there is a lot that women can do themselves to make sure that you have optimal health. It's kind of like brushing your teeth every day. You know, this is something that we're totally used to doing. We all brush our teeth and we know why we do it. We feel dirty when we don't do it. And I think, you know, when it comes to our microbiome, whether it's in the gut or in the vagina or on our skin, we need to do the same kind of thing. You know, we need to just work towards an optimal microbiome so that we minimize the diseases that you can get when you don't have an optimal microbiome. But before we can do that, we need to study how best to do that. And that actually turned out to be very difficult to do, much more difficult than I had expected going into this field. So we're still very busy studying different ways of trying to optimize the microbiome. And not everything that we have tried has been successful. So this is still an area of ongoing research. And not only for optimizing the microbiome using things that women can do themselves, but also, for example, figuring out how we can actually reduce HIV transmissions, how we can reduce preterm birth. So those really are like medical interventions that need to be done, and trying to figure out which types of interventions actually make a difference in terms of reducing HIV, reducing preterm births, reducing cervical cancer, etc. So there is still a lot of research going on in those areas. I don't know how much more you would like me to talk about this. I can talk about this for hours, but I think it might be more useful for you to ask me questions.
Sure, I think, yeah. Thank you so much. As you say, there's so much we would love to hear you for very long. I would love to hear also questions if somebody has questions, so we can make it more like a conversation. Otherwise, yeah. But if somebody has any comments or questions, visions, Margarita, please. To the imaginary microphone that doesn't really
Thank you. Well, thank you, all of you. It's super interesting to listen to you. I have a very practical question for you. How do you brush your microbiome?
It's a very good question, because we actually, I think brushing is not possible, because you would damage the skin inside the vagina is quite fragile, and you would damage the skin, which then means that, for example, viruses can get in even more easily. So that is not something that you want to do. But it is a very good question, because we know that some of the bad bacteria, they cause what we call a biofilm. So they kind of clip together, and then they get stuck to the vaginal wall, and it's actually really difficult to get rid of that. Even when you take antibiotics or antifungal drugs, they don't always penetrate the biofilm. So this is something that is an area of active research. How can we clean the biofilms without brushing? Because with the teeth we can brush, but in the vagina we can't. So very good question.
Somebody else? Questions? Yeah.
Following up on that, you mentioned that there's still research on how to optimize the vaginal health, but are there any very practical things that we can do when we go home to optimize our vaginal health?
Yes, I think one of the things, and this hasn't really been, well, it has been researched, but we haven't tried whether it makes a difference. But by the bacteria, the bad bacteria, and actually also the good bacteria, they probably come from the gut. You know, your gut is full of bacteria, and you eat all day long, and you drink, you know, you like the lactobacilli, you drink dairy products, and they contain lactobacilli. So they sit in your gut, and they probably travel from the gut to your urinary tract and to your vagina. But then the urinary tract and the vagina have a very distinct environment from the gut. So the moment the bacteria arrive there, some of them will die immediately, others will survive. And then, of course, in the urinary tract, there is urine flow. So only the bacteria that can attach to the bladder wall and don't get flushed out with the urine can survive. So you get differentiation. So some bacteria will survive, others won't. But basically, what you can do, I think, for some of the bad bacteria that women have when they have bacterial vaginosis, and also some of the yeast maybe, is to try to not contaminate, if you will, the vagina and the skin around your vagina too much with bacteria that are coming from your gut. So hygiene is important. So that's, I think, is something that women can do, really kind of pay attention to that. You know, so that you don't introduce those bacteria inside your vagina and inside your urinary tract. We haven't actually tried any interventions, if that makes, you know, whether, like, for example, how you wipe after you've been to the toilet, whether that actually makes a difference. But we have studied which bacteria are present in the gut, as well as the urinary tract, as well as the vagina. And so from those data, I think that they do travel around there. So hygiene probably is important. The same thing applies, and this has been studied during sexual activity. Men also carry bacteria on the penis, for example. And those are introduced also, obviously. And what we often see is when women have a new sexual partner and are exposed to bacteria that they were never exposed to before. So they don't have their bodies are not used to those bacteria yet. That's often when they develop a urinary tract infection or bacterial vaginosis. Hygiene related to sexual activity is important. Like, for example, condom use might help. Another thing that we know about is that hormones can really help. So women who really have a problem with recurrent infections, what might help is hormonal contraception. I know not all women like hormones, but we know that the lactobacilli really like the estrogen in hormonal contraception that contains estrogen, like pills, combined pills. So it will really give the lactobacilli an advantage. It gives them a chance to grow and survive. And so we see, and we've done lots of studies where we weren't giving women contraception, but we did ask them which contraceptive methods they were using. And we saw a big difference between the women who were using hormonal contraception. They tended to have healthier vaginas than women not using hormonal contraception. So these are a few things I think that could be done. I would be very careful with commercial douches that you can buy in pharmacies, or things like lactic acid. We have studied those, and they tend to actually have the opposite effect, that they actually don't improve the vaginal environment, but they tend to cause yeast infections. So I would not use those.
Do we have other questions? I would like to. Sorry. So you have a question? Oh, from the chat. Yeah. Do you want to read it for us?
So somebody's wondering if Janneke or anyone she knows is drawing links with traditional, non-Western, etc. medicine. All the herbal medicine people have been using for a long time, some more effective than others.
I'm not really sure what herbal medicine the person referred to. We studied herbs that women put inside the vagina. For the most, it really depends on what it is. Some of them actually they are very abrasive. And they actually cause the skin of the vaginal walls to be damaged. So I would definitely recommend against those. But yeah, it's hard to answer that question without knowing exactly, because each herb or each traditional medicine is different. You would have to study each of them in their own right, because they each have their own local effects.
Dr. Janneke here is representing Western medicine. So, as you say, each one should come with the specificities. Yeah.
Thanks. I heard a lot about gut health and then vaginal health, but are they related? And yes, they are probably, because you mentioned before, these bacteria can travel in your body. But how about the importance of food and our diet then in both like these microbiome balances?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and a very active field of research. But I'm afraid that we don't really have the answers yet. I think they probably are related, because, like I said, a lot of the bacteria that we find elsewhere on the body originate from the gut. So what you eat really matters. I think, for a lot of things, including your microbiome in other places in the body than just the gut. We know that the gut microbiome composition has a direct effect on your immune system. So if your immune system changes, then that will also have an effect on microbiomes elsewhere in your body. So yes, I think it's very important that we study this, but at the moment we don't have the answers yet.
Any other questions for Isabel or Julia? Otherwise, I would like to ask them a question. If that's okay. You have one for them? Yes, yes, okay.
Sorry, I came in late, so I might have missed something, but yeah. So over the last few years, quite a few celebrities, women celebrities have come forward about different vaginal health products that are obviously a scam, like Gwyneth Paltrow with her yoni egg, and then Willow Smith, like Will Smith's daughter, was also promoting like vaginal steaming. And I was wondering if you have any tips to like protect women against like these vaginal health scams.
Yeah. You want to start with scams?
So it's not really about the influencer promoting it. For me, it's the business behind it. So for me, it's as dangerous. The yoni egg, I don't know. Oh, today someone asked us about it. I never heard this, but those things. It's as dangerous this as it is a whole private word that makes profit on making an IP of human genomics of women, selling it to actually sell something that they should be able to also better understand. You were mentioning the disclaiming about being public researcher rather than be private. And this makes a huge difference, being able to understand vaginal microbiome in a public sector as it is in the private one, because public does it for the sake of prevention and health. Private does it for the sake of profit. So for me, it's always about being critical, not really. I think people is desperate in seeking something that works. And this is first thing. So hearing people, their stories, why they are desperate in trying different products. This is the main aspect, I would say. Doctors should take more time in hearing and listening what the patient are saying rather than prescribing stuff. You have really to understand what is the person experiencing, because you can also find the best treatment for that person and guide the person in the right direction. And also be honest, there is not a option for everyone. There is not a magic ingredient for everyone, especially for female health. There's almost nothing available. It's just recent that the microbiome is a topic on the table in public health and private health. And now there is a war starting between the public and the private regarding the microbiome. And we are very worried about what is happening in the future about this, because it's having a momentum very big. And a lot of companies are making profit on that. And they don't have the answer yet. But there will be a certain moment, how is happening already, that public researcher will need to pay private companies to have access to a specific type of genoma or lactobacillus, because it has been patented and privatized. And this is coming from our own body. It's not that it's invented somewhere. And we should be more aware of the business and the private word behind this. So for me, it's really about opening the eyes politically, practically, being more empathetic with people that is suffering, because being sick is part of our daily life, but somehow we have created a whole world where the concept of health is really misleading. In most of the cultures in the world for centuries, there was not a division between being healthy and being sick. Sickness was just, a part of something that you have to transition in your life, as life and death is the same. So we should be more empathetic, finding new ways of understanding that is not about the product, but is the reason of what you want to, maybe you have lost important aspect of your life. Maybe you have infections that have really not helped you in having a pleasant sexual life. Maybe you're not comfortable in the clothes you're wearing. There are a lot of women that are not able to wear jeans because of the level of infection they have. Women that has miscarriage and was a super traumatic experience, people that had premature children, like, or very heavy infections, cancer. Okay, it's not something that you joke about, why someone wants to have a yoni egg in their vagina. Probably they're really desperate. First thing. Second is being really critical about the business that is moving around healthcare in general, because it's big business, healthcare. Second one, specifically now, women's health. Like, no one has ever wondered nothing about gynecology and women's health for centuries. And right now, everyone is so inspired and amazed and willing to find solution. And I don't think that this is always genuine, especially in the profit world. So be aware also of that. And the idea is also create new forms of relationship between the scientific world and the non-scientific world to be more prepared and be aware and more strong when this will happen and change finally this system.
You want to add something?
Yeah. I also wanted to add that the regulations have become much more strict recently. It used to be that people could put anything on the market and get away without doing any safety testing or even proving that something worked. But now, at least the European Union and the United States, and I think probably also other governments, but I know for sure United States and European Union have tightened their regulations. So it's no longer possible to put things on the market that aren't safe or do not do what you claim on the package that it does. So you have to prove that it actually has that effect. So it's becoming more difficult to market things.
You had a question?
Thanks. Yeah, maybe for both, because you mentioned that you reached out to more than 100 women, and maybe you also met so many in your workshops. And you were talking about some didn't have symptoms. So I wonder if you encounter the fact that sometimes women don't recognize their symptoms because you just get maybe used to those symptoms in your daily life, so you don't even reach out and you're just thinking that that's the normality or the norm.
Yeah, it actually goes both ways. Sometimes women have symptoms and they don't have an infection. And then sometimes women have an infection and they don't have symptoms. So the symptoms are difficult to interpret, but you are absolutely right that some women, I think, get used to having symptoms. I also think that some women respond more strongly, like they have immune systems that are activated more strongly than other women do. So there are lots of differences between women, but we have learned over the years that we cannot just look at symptoms, because we will miss infections if we did that. But also when women have symptoms, we do need to test them to see what is going on, because we cannot assume that they have an infection. So it's really, for physicians, it's actually quite a difficult field. Because, you know, like when people have a cold, usually it's quite clear they have a cold, and but with urinary tract but particularly vaginal infections, it's for physicians, it's actually very difficult to figure out what is going on just based on symptoms. It would be good if they could also do a diagnostic test.
We are about to wrap up, so if you have any other final questions, if somebody wants to ask, okay. I'm gonna go there.
Thank you all so much. My question regards a bit more the stage sort of before when the bad bacteria start to produce anything. So more on the prevention kind of part of the vaginal health in that sense, because personally, I never had any education about this. It's not sex eds or something that my mother would tell me. So how would you go about educating yourself on this topic? Because the internet is so full of, if I may say, bullshit as well. Yeah, do you have any insights regarding, I don't know, hair, what kind of underwear to wear? How do you know how to, like, what is truth and what is not?
We have two experts in bringing this kind of information and making workshops and with feminist strategies for organizations. You maybe want to address this one.
Well, so luckily now we live in a world, because as Isabel was mentioning, now women's health is becoming a topic that even in TV, my grandma can listen about and understand what is endometriosis, which because was completely mysterious and even not existing. Luckily, there are a lot of books, which is amazing, because you can even find books for kids to really explain what is a vulva, what is a penis, like how the whole apparatus work, how the reproduction works. There are many books now also for teenagers, which really show to teens that they go from 10 to 15 when they really like start to menstruate, how their body is changing. And so through this type of sort of skills that they can slowly learn, this is all prevention. So I believe that there should be much more of these books coming into schools, for example, because it's there where we should learn. We shouldn't arrive at 30 years old to really understand things. And many taboos that unfortunately are still related to our bodies, starting even from female masturbation, or also just looking at our own vulva from a mirror, should be destigmatized from the beginning. We are coming from Italy, so we have the Pope in our country, so it's completely impossible. But luckily there are collective, transfeminist collective mainly, which slowly are bringing this even into schools and into public audience. And then for us, we can find a lot online. Of course, you need to go in the right places, find the right resources. One of the plan of the online platform is to also build this archive, because everything exists already. Really, also what we are bringing in the workshop, as we were mentioning, it's something that we are just bringing it again accessible to people, translating it from the Italian to English, because most of the things, sometimes we can find them either in English or Spanish. In Italian, for example, there is nothing. Guessing why, because of course it's a complete taboo. So, and of course it's also like there should be this type of word of mouth, this like translation that, and how to say, tramandare. Like a passage of knowledge, which we had. There were always like this passage of knowledge, maybe with families or with the eldest woman in the tribe. And now we should be like us, maybe like also maybe through the card game we invented or other tools to really start generating those experiences, those stories, because it's really true there that through this method that in the 70s they invented in really creating this knowledge field, that we should continue, because unfortunately it's really like a story that is not there, and just as we can create it.
I also had one thing, is that you're so lucky that you never had vaginal infections, or maybe you had it without symptoms. Prevention is also difficult because every single person is has specific propension to some type of infections. lifestyles is different for everyone. What we notice through the people that we have interviewed and participate to our workshop and the network we have is that more recurrency you have, more skilled you become, and more you start recognizing some patterns. So, and this is also helpful to prevent, on your specific case, some things that might lead you to have that. But really, if you listen to every person that has gained a specific knowledge based on their body, you will see that they found completely different prevention systems. Someone wears specific fabric because they realized that there was a skin reaction to the fabric. The products, I know people that have washed their vagina for all their life with soaps that like can change the pH of the vagina, and nothing has happened as far as they know, and people who are really, really sensitive to this kind of things. So it's prevention is I think it's more about having the like the ingredients. You must be aware of the different ingredients that might create an imbalance in your body, but then it's up to you. And then of course transition the disease. Sometimes it happens. Infections are also very, I think it's quite impossible to avoid to have some infections. I think I don't know. I don't think there is one person in life that has never, ever had. Also because our way of living in an ecosystem. The thing is that we should also being able to not have some infection becoming so problematic that lead to worse condition, like contracting, being more exposed, having more possibility to contract HIV if exposed. This is a problem. So, or miscarriage, or this kind of things that that were mentioned before. So I don't think we can avoid to have some infections, but what you can recognize your patterns, which are specific for you, and no one can tell you that is not true. But then, so knowledge, recognize your expertise, and then of course, education of every single meaning, that it has to come from cultural education, sexual education, medical education, everything, like how to use a speculum, everything, like everything, because no one of these things are separated. No one, also because they all share the same environment. So the interesting thing of the vagina is that really it's a word that connects a lot of different aspects of the life. So this is really, we cannot speak about self-gynecology if we don't speak about self-gynecology, self-exploration in gynecology if we don't speak about sexual education and pleasure. They are connected. And we found speculum in Sexy Shop.
Yes, thank you so much. I was wondering, so I know you received the STARTS Prize in 2017, and now you have the ALMA toolkit, and you started with this new workshop series. What's next for you, for the group?
Yes, no, I received the prize in 2018, which is like makes a difference because that project I graduated in 2016, almost failing at St. Martin's. Sorry, I always want to remember this because 2 years later, with the same prize, I got a 20K prize, which is an honor in technology and science, so which proved the opposite maybe to my director, but it's fine. And but it made it happen not only because I'm very stubborn. I developed documentaries. I really made a lot of things to really change to really create the context around this project, because it was speculative, and speculative design is very difficult to prove it to people when you really plan like a design concept that can come in the future. So documentaries most of the time are the best tool. So really movies, like really having people acting and imagining this reality. And what happened is that in 2017, the hashtag #MeToo movement appeared. So people started to really claim their body back by saying what happened, what was happening in their work, the violence they had. But that was a new wave also of feminism which arrived, and then the project was started, had a different recognition. So of course, it was not anymore the provocative student, but was something that maybe in the future could happen. So for us was very much easier, let's say from 2018 onwards, to talk about these topics. We are very happy that STARS is supporting us all the time. And also the family of Ars Electronica, because it's one of the only, I believe, well, institution that really can combine art, science, and technology for the society all together, and really being able to create this community and network all over the world. So we now have this little like prize that we got to kickstart the project, which is amazing. So what we need next is to continue, and it's very bad to talk about, but of course we need money. So this is like the fact. But we, especially me and her in the team, we are very critical from the money are coming from, how then we have to, of course, use them in order to produce the type of knowledge that then we want to bring back. So for what we will do soon, so she has to finish her PhD, and then we will do probably a company or like a legal entity which will fit our own ethical needs, because it's what we don't want to change. Even though we've been through incubators which wanted us to be a for-profit and really pushed us, and we said no. I had a very big drama to really like prove that the way that we are doing things, if we are doing it, it really has a meaning, and it shouldn't change because the market, the capitalism works in this way. I think from my point of view, capitalism should change, not us. So we are not gonna start to just be in the system, but it's the system that should adapt to new ways of doing, of producing knowledge and design. So I guess that, yeah, if there will be more access to citizen science funds, I think is where we can fit most, also to education, combined to technology, but it's really the citizen science. So really allowing every one of us, every citizen, to have access to science and technology, even though they maybe didn't study or they didn't have access. So yes, we hope to be able to continue, but we will in any ways.
Well, I don't know if you have any final comments, Janneke, that you would like to something shortly to wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, really nice work that you guys are doing. I think more generally, I'm a big believer in giving people more control over their health and giving them the tools that they need to be able to take care of themselves as much as possible. And I think the kind of stuff that you guys are doing is we need a lot more of that. I think that's really, really good. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to have you here, and we will welcome you next time.